Well, thank you so much, Dominic and the Lucis Trust, for inviting me here today as a representative of the Chalice Well to be with all of you lovely people here in the room and wherever in the world you might be. And I'm just going to take you on a little journey to a very special place, and also to the story of a very inspiring man who himself was a great server. In a quiet corner of England, in a timeless and sacred landscape, on an island, rich and alive with mythic tradition, nestled in a valley between two hills, one of them Glastonbury Tor, is a place of sanctity, healing, and peace. A thin place which many have described as a portal between heaven and earth. And in the heart of this quiet sanctuary is an ancient and holy well. And it bears witness to the thousands of pilgrims whose footsteps have trodden the time-worn path to its perpetual spring with its iron-rich waters. Many people have asked me, what is this place? What is it that's here? What is it about this place that warms the heart, uplifts the spirits, and inspires? I can't give a definitive answer. All I can say is this is the mystery. So, how many of you here have visited Chalice Well? Oh, quite a few of you. And do you remember the first time you came? Nodding. I remember the first time I visited Chalice Well, and I stood at the wellhead in the pouring rain, and beside me stood a woman from Hawaii, and she was channeling the energies of Mother Mary, singing this beautiful melodic Hawaiian huna song. And that really sticks in my memory as a very special moment, because I somehow knew then that I would get to work and serve at this unique and special place. When I was 16, I fell in love with a song by Van Morrison, In the Garden. How many of you know that song? Oh, it's just me. You're going to know the song after this. So the words of the song struck me then, really powerful words. The song goes, "And then one day you came back home. You were a creature all in rapture. You had found the keys to your soul, and you did open that day you came back to the garden. And I turned to you and I said, no guru, no method, no teacher, just you and I and nature in the garden, wet with rain." And I have often thought that Chalice Well is in some ways like the original Garden of Eden. And I have wondered, what if humanity never left the garden? What if we were never cast out, and our return is simply a remembering of where we have always been? It was only some years ago that I discovered that Van Morrison had written his song inspired by his own visit to Chalice Well Garden. So In the Garden is a song about Chalice Well. The Chalice Well Trust was founded in 1959 by a man called Wellesley Tudor Pole, and I will share some of his life and work shortly. But the purposes and the aims of the Chalice Well Trust were to preserve and safeguard this holy place for people of all paths, philosophies and faiths, and none, in perpetuity. And also one of the purposes is to offer opportunities for spiritual education. So this is a place where those in service to the greater good can come to be restored, nourished, renewed, and inspired. And servers and healers and teachers and pilgrims and visitors from all over the world come to Chalice Well every day. And we have these gatherings that follow the cycle of the seasons of nature, these meditative gatherings. And sometimes we have up to over 500 people that come. And these gatherings reflect, I think, an emerging form of spirituality, which is universal in its form and its language. And that people gather not in a place of worship or a building, but in nature and in a garden, offers an opportunity to have a shared acknowledgement of the sacred and divine, which transcends borders and differences. In our activities and events, the Chalice Well holds an ethos of many paths, one source. So I had to have a smile at the title of the talk this morning, One Note, One Sound, Many Notes. It comes from a very similar place. And we have, over the last recent years, have had festivals exploring what lies at the heart of some of these major spiritual faiths and traditions. And I'm hoping that the next slide, oh, not that one. There we are, these are our gatherings. Yes, so for example, we have hosted an exposition of the Shroud of Turin during Passion Week. We've had an exhibition of the relics of Buddhist masters over the last 2,000 years, including those of Milarepa and Padmasambhava, and even, amazingly, a fragment of the skull of Shakyamuni Buddha. Right at the beginning of the escalation of the conflict in Syria, we held a festival on the sacred arts of Islam. And here are three wonderful people: the young Walid Khan with his teacher, Ustad Saif Rahman, who flew all the way from Lahore in Pakistan to be with us. And actually, Walid said a wonderful thing. He said, "I have visited many, many paradise gardens all over the world, but this, to me, is the most wonderful, most beautiful paradise garden I have ever experienced." We've also had a festival exploring the Celtic heart. And here are two wonderful singers, Liam O'Malley from, some of you may know, the Hot House Flowers, and Lisa Lamb. And I was really delighted to be asked to go and sing with them. And what was really extraordinary, as I was riffing on one of the songs, that Liam came in with the words, totally spontaneously, to Van Morrison's In the Garden. It was a real moment. And in this last year, we have had a 9-day festival exploring the practice and philosophy of Buddhism. And we had the wonderful Tashi Lumpo monks come all the way from their monastery in southern India to create a beautiful sand mandala to Chinrezig, the Buddha of love and compassion. And I was reminded that this is something that our founder, Tudor Pole, said, that one of the purposes of Chalice Well is to create the conditions where love can manifest in act and word. And it was certainly very apparent in that festival week. So the vision for Chalice Well embraces a vision of a world where the spiritual and the material meet and are indivisible and indistinguishable. And Tudor Pole wrote of a vision where humanity ceases to hang itself upon the cross of suffering and instead sips the cup of joy. It was in 1902 that Wellesley Tudor Pole, as a young man of 18, first came to the Chalice Well Gardens. They didn't look as they do now. They were slightly wilder and more unkempt. But nevertheless, the atmosphere that he experienced around the well deeply affected him. And he knew then that he would in somehow revive and restore Chalice Well to become a center for new and emerging spirituality. He said of Chalice Well that Chalice Well is a window into the wider realms of being, and also a channel through which inspiration can pour and be more widely felt and accepted and experienced than elsewhere. When the First World War broke out, Tudor Pole joined the army and he became a young officer. And instead of being sent to the killing fields of France, he was actually dispatched to Cairo to become part of the offensive for southern Palestine and to capture Jerusalem. He was an extraordinary young man, even at a young age, and he had unusual perceptions and abilities. And, he was a mystic and a seer and a visionary, and he's once described sitting in church and watching the colors of prayers float up above the congregation. It was on the 10th of December in 1917. He was outside the hills of Jerusalem with a fellow officer. They had having a conversation about a battle that was to become and the possible aftermath of the war. And the conversation took place at a billet on a hillside by the mouth of a cave. And he was with an officer called Rawson, who was a man of unusual character and vision. And Rawson realized intuitively that his days on earth were shortened. And he said to TP, "I shall not come through this struggle. And like millions of other men in this war, it will be my destiny to go on now. You will survive and live to see a greater and more vital conflict fought out in every continent and ocean and in the air. When that time comes, remember us. We shall long to play our part wherever we may be. Give us the opportunity to do so. For that war for us will be a righteous war. We shall not fight with material weapons then, but we can help you if you let us. We shall be an unseen but mighty army. Give us the chance to pull our weight. You still have time available as your servant. Lend us a moment of it each day, and through your silence, give us your time and the opportunity. The power of silence is more powerful than you know. When those tragic days arrive, do not forget us." And so the battle ensued. Tudor Pole was shot in the arm by a sniper and wounded. And, as he had predicted, his friend Rawson was killed in the attack. It was during 1940, when the events of the Second World War had intensified, Tudor Pole recalled the work of his fellow officer. The way in which these words would come to fruition at a time of unfolding crisis. He went and spoke with the Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, and members of his cabinet. He had an audience with King George VI, and he spoke with the BBC World Service. And on the 23rd of April, which is St. George's Day, and also Tudor Pole's birthday, the silent minute began. And from that day, 9 o'clock, the chimes of Big Ben, which had been silent through the war until that point, rang. And those chimes were broadcast on the air BBC World Service throughout the world. And they were followed by a minute's silence. Oh, that's Jerusalem. Silent minute. This silence was observed by millions who gathered around their radios and just gave that minute of their time each day. The power of that silent minute, looking for my papers. The power of that silent minute was recognized very much, particularly after the war, unusually by Nazi high command. So at the end of hostilities, there was a high-ranking German officer who was quoted as saying, "During the war, you had a secret weapon for which we could find no countermeasure, and which we did not understand, but was very powerful. It was associated with the striking of Big Ben at 9 each evening, and I believe you called it the silent minute." Well, we continue the observance of the silent minute every day at the Chalice Well Gardens with the ringing of the old school bell at midday and at 3 o'clock whilst the gardens are open. And the story of the silent minute appears in this book, which is available on the table, The Chalice Well, The Story of a Living Sanctuary. I'm very nearly there. And with a synchronicity, earlier this year, at the end of January, there were 3 groups who were in Australia on retreat. Sydney Goodwill, the Hill Center in New Hampshire, America, and the Signet Center for Peace Building and Transformation. And one of the retreatants had brought with them a copy of this book, and another retreatant had found and discovered the story of the silent minute. And they were all inspired by the idea that perhaps they needed to create an exact same silent minute today for people to come together across the globe. And Dot Maver, Wendy Thompson, Tara Stewart, and Vivienne Smith, they visited Chalice Well and stayed in our retreat house, Little St. Michael's. And they explained that their vision for the silent minute, which is to be held at 9 o'clock, the exact same time across the world, on the winter solstice today. And this global silent minute has the support of the new group of World Service and the United Nations Goodwill NGO. And this is a statement from them. "On the verge of the festival week, the commencement of a new cycle will begin with a minute of silence. And in this active silence, we will consciously cooperate with the co-workers in the One Heart to envisage the evolutionary emerging seeds of the future." So I hope you too, wherever you are, will also join this silent minute this evening. And have I got 30 seconds just to close with a few words from Wellesley Tudor Pole. It's from this book, Light Upon the Path. It's called Silence is Strength. "In the unity of the silent minute, spiritual power is made available for the service of mankind. Peace and power can be drawn from the infinite reservoirs of silence. Silence is not a vacuum in time and space. On the contrary, profound wisdom dwells within its depth. Silence is not simply the absence of sound and speech. It can become a gateway of the eternal mind." Thank you.